In the vast darkness of space, where civilizations rise and fall like distant stars, there exists a species that defies every law of galactic warfare. They don't possess the crystalline intellect of the Zephyrians, nor the biomechanical supremacy of the Hive Collective. They lack the psychic dominance of the Ethereal Council and the technological perfection of the Machine Dynasty. Yet 12 of the galaxy's most feared military commanders, beings who had conquered star systems and enslaved entire species, vanished without a single distress signal while hunting just one of them. One human. The Galactic Tribunal called it impossible. The military academies declared it a statistical anomaly. The surviving witnesses whispered a different truth, that humanity's greatest weapon isn't their technology or their numbers. It's what happens when you corner something that refuses to die quietly. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a maintenance engineer from Earth's outer colonies, and how he turned the galaxy's most elite predators into prey. A tale that would redefine everything the universe thought it knew about the species called human, and why some hunts are better left unstarted. Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands as he finished repairing the atmospheric recycler on Mining Station Kepler 7. The ancient machinery hummed back to life, a sound that had become as familiar to him as his own heartbeat over the past 3 years. At 32, Marcus had spent more time in the cold vacuum of space than most people spent in their childhood bedrooms, moving from one remote outpost to another, fixing what others couldn't or wouldn't. The mining station floated in the shadow of a dying red giant, its hull scarred by decades of asteroid impacts and cosmic radiation. It was the kind of place the galaxy forgot existed, a collection of prefab modules and improvised repairs that somehow managed to extract rare metals from the system's asteroid belt. The crew of 47 souls called it home, though Marcus suspected most would abandon it without a second thought if they had anywhere else to go. Commander Koresh of the Zephyrian hegemony would have agreed with that assessment, had he bothered to study the intelligence reports his subordinates prepared. Instead, he stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crystalline Fong, watching the small mining station through sensors that could count individual rivets on its hull. To Koresh, it represented something far more valuable than rare metals or strategic position. It represented prey. Confirmed human presence, Commander, reported his tactical officer, a young Zephyrian whose crystalline carapace still gleamed with the blue tint of inexperience. Single individual, designation Marcus Chun. Former Earth Colonial Engineering Corps, discharged after the Titan incident. No military ranking, no combat experience on file. Koresh's mandibles clicked together in what passed for amusement among his species. The Zephyrians had evolved from insectoid predators on a world where only the most cunning hunters survived. Their society valued the chase above all else, and in recent years, they had developed a particular fascination with hunting humans, the newest species to achieve interstellar travel. Perfect, Koresh hissed, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked him as nobility among his kind. Initiate communication with the other commanders. It's time to begin. The hunt had been planned for months. 12 of the galaxy's most accomplished military leaders, representing different species and factions, had agreed to participate in what they called the Human Trials, a series of elaborate hunts designed to test the capabilities of Earth's children against the galaxy's apex predators. Marcus, focused on his work, remained blissfully unaware of the conference call taking place in the void around him. On secure channels, voices speaking dozens of different languages coordinated what they believed would be a simple exercise in tactical superiority. General Thane of the Quran Empire spoke first, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to emanate from the depths of a mountain. The Qurans were silicon-based life forms who had conquered their homeworld through sheer persistence and overwhelming force. The target shows no signs of awareness. My analysis indicates this will conclude within standard cycles. Agreed. Added hive mind, node, epsilon, 7 of the collective, its synthetic voice lacking any trace of emotion. The collective had absorbed thousands of species into their biomechanical matrix, gaining their knowledge and abilities. Human psychological profiles suggest surrender upon demonstration of superior force. Resistance probability, minimal. Admiral Zexhai of the Void Hunters chimed in with a sound like grinding metal. Her species existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that drove other beings insane to contemplate. This one shows no psychic defenses. I will strip his mind bare within moments of engagement. The other commanders added their own assessments, each more confident than the last. They had studied human military records, analyzed battle footage from the recent skirmishes between Earth and various alien raiders. To them, humans appeared to be a species that relied heavily on technology and numerical superiority. Strip away those advantages, and they seemed little more than soft, emotional creatures driven by fear and self-preservation. Marcus finished his repairs and began packing his tools, unaware that his every movement was being analyzed by some of the most sophisticated military minds in the galaxy. He moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had spent years working in dangerous environments, checking each tool twice before stowing it, always aware of his surroundings, even in the relative safety of the station. The mining station's captain, Elena Vasquez, found him in the maintenance bay as he prepared to leave for his next assignment. She was a weathered woman in her 50s who had run cargo through some of the most dangerous sectors of human space. Her eyes held the kind of wariness that came from surviving too many encounters with things that wanted to kill her. "You sure you have to leave tomorrow?" she asked, though they both knew the answer. Marcus's contract had been fulfilled, and his transport to the next station was already arranged. "Afraid so," Marcus replied, sealing his toolkit. "But that recycler should give you another 5 years if you keep up with the maintenance schedule I programmed." Elena nodded, though something in her expression suggested she wasn't entirely focused on atmospheric recyclers. "Marcus, you hear any strange chatter on the long-range communications lately? Traffic that doesn't quite make sense." Marcus paused, considering. He had noticed some unusual encrypted transmissions during his work on the communication arrays, but he had assumed they were related to mining operations he wasn't clear to know about. "A little." "What?" "Probably nothing," Elena said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "Just keep your eyes open out there. The frontier's been feeling different lately, like something's watching." Marcus would remember those words 12 hours later when his transport ship, a small freight hauler called the Lucky Strike, suffered what appeared to be a cascade failure in its jump drive. The ship dropped out of hyperspace in an empty system, drifting helplessly between dimensions while its crew tried to understand what had gone wrong. That's when the first ships appeared. Commander Koresh's crystalline Fong materialized from the quantum foam like a predator emerging from tall grass. The Zephyrian flagship was a work of art as much as it was an instrument of war, its biocrystalline hull growing and shifting like a living thing, its weapon systems integrated so seamlessly into its structure that it was impossible to tell where ship ended and weapon began. Marcus stood in the Lucky Strike's cramped cargo bay, watching through a porthole as more ships arrived. A Koron dreadnought, its massive bulk resembling an asteroid that had been hollowed out and filled with weapons. A collective vessel that defied geometric logic, its surface crawling with mechanical parasites that rebuilt and modified it in real time. A Void Hunter ship that seemed to flicker in and out of existence, as if it couldn't quite decide which dimension it wanted to occupy. The freight hauler's captain, a grizzled veteran named Torres, stood beside Marcus with a grim expression. "I've seen formations like this before," he said quietly. "This isn't pirates or raiders. This is something organized." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach as more ships continued to arrive. 12 in total, representing military forces from across the galaxy. Ships that had no business being in the same system, let alone working together. They're here for someone specific, Marcus realized, though he didn't want to acknowledge what his instincts were telling him. The communication array crackled to life, filled with voices speaking in harmony despite their different languages. The universal translator aboard the Lucky Strike struggled to keep up as 12 different commanders addressed their prey. Human-designated Marcus Chun came Koresh's harmonic voice, filled with the confidence of a predator that had cornered its quarry. You are cordially invited to participate in a demonstration of galactic military superiority. Surrender now, and your death will be swift and honorable. Marcus stared at the display, showing the massive fleet arrayed around their tiny ship. 12 commanders, 12 ships, all for one human engineer who just wanted to fix broken machines and earn enough credits to maybe buy a small farm on one of the colony worlds. Captain Torres was already reaching for the surrender beacon when Marcus grabbed his arm. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the terror clawing at his chest. "Let me think for a minute." Torres stared at him in disbelief. "Think? Marcus, there are 12 alien warships out there. What's to think about?" Marcus looked back through the porthole at the assembled fleet. Each ship represented technology centuries ahead of anything humans possessed. Each commander had conquered star systems and commanded the respect of the galaxy's most dangerous military forces. They had come here expecting to hunt a helpless human engineer who would panic and surrender within minutes. But Marcus had spent 3 years in the most remote and dangerous corners of human space, fixing machines that everyone else had given up on. He had learned to see solutions where others saw only problems, to find ways to make broken things work again, even when logic said it was impossible. And right now, looking at the most powerful military formation he had ever seen, Marcus began to smile. "Torres," he said, his voice taking on a tone the captain had never heard before. "Remember what Elena said about keeping our eyes open? I think I'm starting to understand what she meant." In the space around them, 12 commanders waited for the inevitable surrender. They had planned this hunt down to the last detail, accounted for every variable, anticipated every possible human response. What they hadn't accounted for was the possibility that their prey might choose to hunt back. The silence stretched for nearly 10 minutes as Marcus studied the tactical display, his engineer's mind cataloging details that the commanders and their mighty warships had dismissed as irrelevant. The Lucky Strike drifted helplessly between the assembled fleet, its engines disabled by what appeared to be a jump drive malfunction. To the watching predators, it represented a wounded animal waiting for the killing blow. Marcus saw something different. "Torres, what's our cargo manifest for this run?" he asked, still studying the display. The captain pulled up the information on his personal tablet, confused by the question. "Standard stuff mostly. Replacement parts for mining equipment, some medical supplies, food rations." He paused, scrolling through the list. "Oh, and that special delivery for the research station at Proxima 9, the one with all the security seals. The quantum resonance cores," Marcus said, remembering the sealed container he had helped load back at Kepler 7. They were experimental power sources, supposedly unstable enough that even looking at them wrong could cause problems. "How many?" 12 units, Torres replied, then went pale as he realized what Marcus was thinking. "Marcus, those things are experimental. The safety protocols alone take up 6 pages of documentation. If they destabilize, they're designed to create controlled quantum fluctuations for research purposes," Marcus interrupted, his mind racing through the technical specifications he had memorized out of professional curiosity. "But if I modify the containment fields, I can make them create very uncontrolled quantum fluctuations." Outside their ship, Commander Koresh was growing impatient. The human had been given sufficient time to acknowledge the hopelessness of his situation. The Zephyrian commander opened a communication channel to his fellow hunters. "Perhaps the prey requires additional motivation," he suggested, his mandibles clicking with anticipation. "General Thane, your weapons have the most impressive visual display. Would you care to provide a demonstration?" General Thane's mountain-deep voice rumbled across the channel. "It would be my pleasure, Commander Koresh." The Koran dreadnought's main cannon began to charge, its crystalline barrel extending from the ship's rocky hull like the stinger of some cosmic insect. Energy readings spiked as it targeted a nearby asteroid, preparing to reduce several million tons of rock and metal to constituent atoms. Marcus felt the vibrations through the Lucky Strike's hull as the massive weapon reached full power. He had perhaps 30 seconds before the demonstration commenced, and after that, the commanders would expect either surrender or the complete destruction of his ship. "Torres, I need you to patch me through to all ships on an open channel," Marcus said, moving toward the cargo bay. "And then, I need you to get as far away from the cargo container as possible." "Marcus, what are you planning?" Torres demanded, but he was already activating the communication array. The weapon discharge from General Thane's ship lit up space like a miniature sun. The targeted asteroid simply ceased to exist, reduced to its component particles in a display of power that should have terrified any sane observer. On 12 different bridges, commanders waited for the inevitable plea for mercy. Instead, they heard laughter. "That's impressive." Marcus's voice carried across all channels, calm and conversational despite the circumstances. "But I have to ask, how many of you actually studied human engineering principles before you planned this little hunting party?" Admiral Zexhai of the Void Hunters spoke first, her grinding voice carrying undertones of annoyance. "Human engineering is primitive compared to galactic standards. Your species has barely achieved basic interstellar travel." "True," Marcus agreed, and the commanders could hear him moving around inside his ship, working on something. "But there's one thing we learned early in our development that I think you might have overlooked. Sometimes the best solution isn't the most advanced one. Sometimes it's the stupidest one that nobody sees coming." Hivemind Node Epsilon 7 processed Marcus's words through thousands of tactical algorithms, searching for hidden meanings or strategies. "Explain your intent, human. Your vessel is disabled and surrounded. No possible course of action leads to your survival." "See, that's where you're wrong," Marcus said, and now the commanders could hear the distinctive whine of power tools being activated. "You all made the same mistake. You assumed that because I'm not a soldier, I'm not dangerous. But here's the thing about engineers. We know how to make things work that were never supposed to work together." The quantum resonance cores were housed in a containment unit roughly the size of a small room, their exotic matter held in perfect suspension by magnetic fields and exotic particle barriers. The safety warnings covering the container were printed in 17 different languages, each one more emphatic than the last about the catastrophic consequences of improper handling. Marcus ignored every single warning. He had spent the last 3 years maintaining equipment in some of the most dangerous environments in human space. He understood better than anyone how to modify systems beyond their design parameters, how to push machinery past its breaking point in pursuit of a specific goal. The quantum resonance cores were designed to create small, controlled tiers in space-time for research purposes. Marcus intended to create one very large, very uncontrolled tear. "Torres, I need you to target our jump drive's quantum resonance chamber and prepare for emergency activation," he called out, welding additional power conduits directly into the containment unit's primary systems. "Marcus, that's insane," Torres shouted back. "The jump drive is damaged. If we try to activate it with the quantum cores destabilizing, the resonance cascade could tear a hole in space-time big enough to swallow this entire star system." "Exactly," Marcus replied cheerfully, bypassing the last safety interlock. "Commander Koresh, are you still listening?" The Zephyrian commander's harmonic voice carried a note of uncertainty for the first time. "State your demands, human." "I don't have any demands," Marcus said, and the power readings from the Lucky Strike began spiking in ways that made no sense according to galactic engineering principles. "But I do have a question for all of you. How much do you know about human military doctrine?" The commanders exchanged confused communications. They had studied human military engagements extensively, analyzed everything from Earth's ancient wars to the recent skirmishes with alien raiders. Admiral Rextar of the Hegemony Defense Corps spoke for the group. "Human military doctrine emphasizes combined arms tactics, technological superiority, and overwhelming force multiplication. Standard galactic parameters." "Wrong," Marcus said, and Now the quantum readings were climbing into ranges that shouldn't have been possible with the equipment aboard a simple freight hauler. Human military doctrine, when you strip away all the fancy technology and formal training, comes down to one basic principle. If you can't win, make sure the other guy loses too. The realization hit all 12 commanders simultaneously. The human wasn't trying to escape. He wasn't trying to surrender. He was trying to take them all with him. Impossible, General Thane rumbled. You would destroy yourself for no tactical gain. This behavior does not align with survival instincts. You really don't understand humans at all, do you? Marcus asked, and there was something in his voice that made even the most confident commanders pause. See, you've been thinking about this all wrong. You keep talking about hunting one human engineer like I'm some kind of isolated target. The quantum resonance cores reached critical instability. Space around the Lucky Strike began to twist and bend as reality itself struggled to contain the forces Marcus had unleashed. But here's what you missed. Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the chaos building around him. I'm not just one human engineer. I'm a human engineer who's been maintaining life support systems for 47 people on mining station Kepler 7. I'm a human engineer who's kept freight haulers running through raider attacks and solar flares and equipment failures that should have killed everyone aboard. The space-time distortions were becoming visible now, ripples in reality that made the assembled fleet's instruments scream warnings about dimensional integrity failures. I'm a human engineer who knows that sometimes the only way to save the people you're responsible for is to break things in ways that nobody expects, Marcus said, and his voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who had made his peace with the consequences of his actions. Commander Koresh felt something he had never experienced in his decades of hunting, genuine fear. Not the controlled tension of a challenging hunt, but the primal terror of a predator that suddenly realized it had cornered something infinitely more dangerous than anticipated. All ships, emergency withdrawal, he commanded, but it was already too late. The quantum resonance cascade reached critical mass just as Marcus activated the Lucky Strike's damaged jump drive. The interaction between the experimental cores and the malfunctioning drive systems created exactly the kind of impossible situation that human engineers specialized in, a problem with no logical solution that somehow worked anyway. Reality tore open around the freight hauler like fabric cut by an impossibly sharp blade. The tears spread outward in all directions, and the 12 most powerful warships in the galaxy found themselves caught in a space-time anomaly that existed only because a human maintenance engineer had decided to weaponize experimental physics in ways that violated several fundamental laws of the universe. As the dimensional rift expanded and their ships were pulled toward destruction, the commanders had one final realization. They had never been the hunters in this scenario. They had always been the prey. The dimensional rift tore through space like a wound in the universe itself, pulling everything within a light-minute radius into its impossible depths. The 12 warships, each representing the pinnacle of their respective civilizations' military might, found themselves dragged into a realm where the normal rules of physics became mere suggestions and survival depended on adaptation rather than firepower. Marcus felt the Lucky Strike tumble through layers of reality that had no names in any language. The cargo bay around him shifted and twisted, sometimes appearing normal, sometimes stretching into impossible geometries that made his eyes water to look at. Torres's voice came through the intercom, distorted by dimensional interference, but still recognizable. Marcus, the navigation systems have gone completely insane. According to our sensors, we're simultaneously in 17 different locations, and none of them exist. That's about right, Marcus replied, checking the readings on his improvised quantum resonance setup. The cores were still stable, relatively speaking, which meant he could potentially control their descent into whatever this place was. Torres, try to raise the other ships on short-range communications. If we're all stuck in here together, we might as well try to figure out where here is. The response came faster than expected. Commander Koresh's harmonic voice carried an undertone of genuine panic that Marcus suspected the Zephyrian had never experienced before. Human Chun, what have you done? Our navigational computers indicate we have been transported beyond the galactic rim, yet stellar cartography suggests we remain in the original system. This is impossible. Welcome to experimental physics, Marcus said cheerfully, though privately he was just as confused as the alien commander. The good news is that we're all alive. The bad news is that I'm not entirely sure where we are or how to get back. General Thane's mountain-deep voice rumbled across the channel. Quran's sensors detect massive energy signatures approximately 10,000 kilometers from our current position. Structure appears artificial, but does not match any known architectural patterns in the galactic database. Marcus felt his blood chill. They weren't alone in this place. Admiral Zexhi's grinding voice added another layer of disturbing information. Void Hunter perception indicates temporal distortions throughout this region. Past, present, and future appear to be occurring simultaneously. I am detecting echoes of events that have not yet happened. The 13 ships, 12 predators, and their unintended prey formed an uneasy formation as they drifted toward the mysterious energy signatures General Thane had detected. Marcus found himself in the unusual position of being the de facto leader of a group that had recently been planning to hunt him for sport. All right, here's what we're dealing with, Marcus said, studying the readings from both his own sensors and the data being shared by the alien ships. We've been pulled into some kind of dimensional pocket. The quantum resonance cascade created a tear in space-time, but instead of destroying us, it pulled us into somewhere else. HiveMind Node Epsilon 7's synthetic voice carried its typical lack of emotion, but Marcus detected something that might have been uncertainty. Collective analysis indicates this region exists outside normal dimensional parameters. Standard tactical protocols do not apply. Request guidance on appropriate survival strategies. Before Marcus could respond, the structure General Thane had detected came into visual range, and all 13 crews fell silent. It was a city. Not just any city, but a metropolis that defied every principle of engineering and architecture that any of them understood. Crystalline spires twisted through dimensions that shouldn't exist, connected by bridges that seemed to be made of solidified time itself. Buildings phased in and out of reality, sometimes appearing as massive geometric forms, sometimes as organic structures that grew and shifted like living things. And scattered throughout the city, like discarded toys in a child's room, were the broken remnants of hundreds of starships. Blessed ancestors, whispered Captain Veltar of the Hegemony Defense Corps, his voice barely audible over the communication channel. Those are warships from across the galaxy. I see Quran dreadnoughts, collective vessels, even some designs I don't recognize. Marcus studied the wreckage through his ship's modest sensors, his engineer's mind automatically cataloging what he saw. Ships from dozens of different civilizations, representing thousands of years of technological development, all broken and scattered throughout the impossible city like the remnants of previous hunting expeditions. How long has this been going on? He asked quietly. The answer came from an unexpected source. A new voice joined their communication channel, speaking an archaic galactic standard that suggested great age. Longer than your species have existed, young engineer. Longer than most of these civilizations have drawn breath among the stars. A new ship appeared on their sensors, approaching from the city's direction. It was small, roughly the size of Marcus's freight hauler, but its design suggested technology far beyond anything the assembled fleet possessed. Its hull seemed to be made of crystallized space itself, and it moved through the dimensional distortions as if they were merely empty vacuum. I am Keeper Nethes, the voice continued, and now they could see the ship's owner through a viewing port. The being appeared roughly humanoid, but its skin held the translucent quality of deep space, and stars seemed to twinkle in the depths of its eyes. I have been the guardian of this place for longer than I care to remember. Commander Koresh, despite his fear, still possessed the instincts of a predator. Guardian of what? What is this place? A trap. Keeper Nethys replied simply, though not one built with malicious intent. This city exists at the confluence of several dimensional streams, a natural phenomenon that occasionally pulls ships from normal space when they create sufficient quantum disturbances. You are not the first to arrive here through such means. Marcus felt pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place. The other ships in the wreckage, they were pulled here the same way we were. Many, yes, though some arrived through other means. The city has a way of attracting those who hunt for sport, those who see other beings as prey to be stalked and killed for entertainment. The ancient keeper's voice carried a weight of sadness that suggested centuries of witnessing such arrivals. The dimensional currents here respond to intent as much as physics. Those who come seeking to kill often find themselves facing trials they never anticipated. Admiral Rextar of the Hegemony Defense Corps spoke up, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding vast fleets. State your demands for our release, Guardian. What price do you require for safe passage back to normal space? Keeper Nethys' laugh held no humor. I make no demands, Admiral. The city itself will test you, as it has tested all who came before. Some pass those tests and earn the right to leave. Others, he gestured toward the wreckage scattered throughout the crystalline spires. Others become permanent residents. Marcus studied the readings from his quantum resonance cores, noting how they seemed to be responding to the dimensional energies of this strange place. An idea began to form in his mind, the kind of impossible solution that only worked because it was too stupid to fail. Keeper Nethys, these tests, are they always individual? Each person faces them alone. That is typically how predators operate, yes. They hunt alone, kill alone, die alone. The city responds accordingly. But what if we're not operating as predators anymore? Marcus asked, and he could almost feel the alien commanders recoiling from the suggestion. What if we work together? The silence that followed his words carried the weight of civilizations reconsidering everything they thought they understood about survival and hierarchy. General Thane was the first to speak. You suggest cooperation between species that have been enemies for centuries? The Qurans do not work with those we consider prey. Then, you'll die here like all the others, Marcus said bluntly. Look around you, General. How many of those wrecked ships belong to species that thought themselves superior? How many commanders told themselves that cooperation was weakness right up until the city turned their own arrogance into a weapon against them? Hivemind, Node, Epsilon, 7 processed the implications through its collective consciousness. Survival probability increases significantly when resources are pooled. The collective acknowledges the logic of temporary alliance. Admiral Zexhai's grinding voice carried reluctant agreement. The Void Hunters have survived by adapting to impossible circumstances. This situation qualifies as impossible. One by one, the other commanders added their grudging agreement. Not because they trusted Marcus or each other, but because the alternative was joining the wreckage field that surrounded the impossible city. Excellent, Keeper Nethys said, and Marcus thought he detected approval in the ancient being's voice. Perhaps you will prove more interesting than most who arrive here. The city awaits your first trial. As if summoned by his words, the crystalline spires began to pulse with new light, and the dimensional distortions around their ships intensified. Marcus felt the lucky strike being pulled toward a massive structure that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. What's the trial? Commander Koresh asked, his predator's instincts warring with the unfamiliar concept of cooperation. Simple, the keeper replied. Survive what you've created. The structure ahead of them opened like a flower made of crystallized space, revealing a chamber large enough to hold all 13 ships. But as they were drawn inside, Marcus realized that the chamber wasn't empty. Waiting for them in the dimensional maze were perfect copies of their own ships, but these versions moved with the predatory grace of beings that had only one purpose: to hunt and kill the originals. Marcus looked at the tactical display showing 12 alien warships facing off against their own twisted reflections and realized that for the first time since this whole situation began, he was exactly where he wanted to be. "All right, everyone," he said into the communication channel, his voice carrying the confidence of an engineer who had just figured out how to solve an impossible problem. "Time to show these things what happens when humans teach the galaxy's apex predators how to work together." The battle for survival was about to begin, and for once, Marcus Chin wasn't the prey. The crystalline chamber erupted into chaos as the mirror ships launched their attack. Each duplicate vessel moved with perfect knowledge of its original's capabilities, strengths, and weaknesses, but they moved alone, each acting as an individual predator seeking to claim its specific prey. Marcus watched the tactical display as 12 of the galaxy's most feared commanders faced their own reflections in combat. Commander Koresh's crystalline Fong dodged and weaved through bio-crystalline weapon blasts from its duplicate, each ship trying to outmaneuver an opponent that knew every trick it might attempt. General Thane's massive dreadnought exchanged thunderous cannon fire with its mirror, neither able to gain a decisive advantage against an enemy that matched its exact capabilities. "This is impossible." Admiral Rexstar's voice crackled over the communication channel as a ship barely avoided a devastating salvo from its duplicate. "How do we fight an enemy that knows our every move before we make it?" "You don't," Marcus replied, studying the quantum resonance readings from his modified cores. The dimensional energies in this chamber were behaving differently than in normal space, responding to intent and emotion as much as physical laws. Not alone, anyway. He activated a wideband communication link to all ships. "Listen to me, all of you. These things aren't just copies of your ships. They're copies of your hunting instincts, your predatory behaviors. They're everything you are when you hunt alone." Admiral Zexhai's ship flickered through multiple dimensions as she tried to escape her duplicate's pursuit. "Then, how do we defeat them? They match us perfectly." "By becoming something they can't match," Marcus said, and began uploading tactical data to all ships simultaneously. "They're perfect predators, but they're still predators. They hunt alone because that's what you do. But what if we don't?" The concept was so alien to most of the commanders that several of them nearly collided with their own duplicates while trying to process it. These were beings who had conquered star systems through individual excellence, species that had evolved predatory instincts as their defining characteristic. "You're suggesting pack tactics. Hive mind node Epsilon," Seven observed, its collective consciousness already running probability calculations. "Coordinated hunting strategies." "Exactly," Marcus confirmed, watching as his own duplicate, a perfect copy of a lucky strike, moved to engage him. "Torres, take us into evasive pattern delta and prepare to execute my modifications to the quantum cores." General Thane's voice rumbled with confusion. "Human Shun, the Korans do not practice pack hunting. Our species evolved as solitary apex predators." "Then, it's time to evolve again." Marcus shot back, his ship dancing around his duplicate's attacks while he rapidly modified the quantum resonance cores. "General, I need you to position your ship between Commander Koresh and his duplicate. Don't engage your own copy yet. Focus on protecting Koresh." "This is madness," General Thane protested, but something in Marcus's voice carried the authority of absolute certainty. The Koran commander, despite millions of years of evolutionary conditioning, found himself altering course to interpose his massive dreadnought between the two Zephyrian vessels. The result was immediate and spectacular. Commander Koresh's duplicate, programmed to hunt the crystalline Fong with single-minded determination, found itself blocked by General Thane's ship. It adapted quickly, trying to maneuver around the obstacle, but Koresh used the momentary reprieve to launch a coordinated attack from an unexpected angle. "Impossible!" Admiral Rextar breathed as he watched the engagement. The duplicate Koresh ship is confused. It knows how to fight Koresh, but not how to fight Koresh protected by Thane. "Exactly," Marcus said, his own ship now dancing a complex pattern around multiple duplicates as he put his plan into motion. These things are perfect copies of individual predators. They don't understand cooperation because you never taught them to. The modifications to his quantum resonance cores reached completion just as his duplicate managed to score a glancing blow against the Lucky Strike shields. Marcus felt the ship shudder, but he was already executing the next phase of his plan. All ships, coordinate your movements with the vessel closest to you. Admiral HFY, pair with Hivemind, Node Epsilon 7. Captain Veltar, coordinate with Admiral Rextar. Everyone else, find a partner and make these duplicates face something they've never seen before. The transformation that followed defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about apex predator behavior. Species that had been mortal enemies for millennia suddenly found themselves working in perfect synchronization. The Void Hunter ship, which existed partially outside normal dimensions, provided cover for the collective vessel while it reconfigured its biomechanical systems for maximum efficiency. Quran and Zephyrian ships, representing civilizations that had fought 3 separate wars over territorial disputes, now moved as a coordinated unit. The duplicates, perfect copies of individual predators, found themselves facing something completely outside their programming. Pack hunters who understood both individual excellence and collective strategy. Marcus watched as Admiral Rextar and Captain Veltar, 2 commanders who had never spoken to each other before today, executed a pincer maneuver that would have made Earth's military academies weep with joy. Rextar's ship drew both duplicates into a pursuit pattern, while Veltar positioned himself for a devastating flanking attack that neither duplicate anticipated. "This is remarkable." Commander Koresh's harmonic voice carried undertones of wonder. "My tactical computers are calculating probability matrices I have never seen before." That's what happens when you stop thinking like prey and start thinking like a pack, Marcus said, his own ship now working in concert with Torres's piloting skills and the tactical support of nearby vessels. Humans learned this lesson a long time ago. Individual excellence is important, but it's what you do together that determines whether you survive or become someone else's trophy. The battle began to shift decisively in their favor. The duplicates, no matter how perfect their individual capabilities, couldn't adapt to coordinated tactics they had never been programmed to understand. General Thane's massive firepower, normally a blunt instrument designed to overwhelm single targets, became a precision tool when guided by Zephyrian sensors and protected by Void Hunter dimensional shields. Hivemind Node Epsilon 7 provided real-time tactical analysis to all ships simultaneously, its collective consciousness processing battle data faster than any individual commander could manage. Admiral HFY's ability to phase between dimensions allowed her to appear at critical moments to disrupt enemy formations, while the other commanders provided covering fire and strategic coordination. But it was Marcus's modifications to the quantum resonance cores that provided the decisive advantage. As the battle reached its climax, he activated a controlled quantum cascade that sent waves of dimensional distortion through the crystalline chamber. The effect was exactly what he had hoped for. The quantum waves disrupted the connection between the original ships and their duplicates, causing the mirror vessels to flicker and fade like ghosts, losing their hold on reality. "Target the quantum resonance points," Marcus shouted over the communication channel. "The duplicates are tied to specific dimensional frequencies. If we disrupt those frequencies, they'll lose cohesion." The coordinated assault that followed was a masterpiece of combined arms tactics. 12 species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of individual predation suddenly demonstrated what they could accomplish when they applied that same deadly efficiency to cooperative warfare. The last duplicate vanished in a cascade of quantum static, its connection to reality severed by the coordinated efforts of 13 ships working as a single unit. The crystalline chamber fell silent except for the hum of cooling weapon systems and the crackle of dimensional interference from Marcus's quantum cores. "Well, Keeper Nethies' voice came through the communication system, carrying what sounded like genuine approval. That was unexpected. Did we pass? Marcus asked, though privately he suspected this was only the beginning. You passed the first trial, the Ancient Guardian confirmed. But there are others. The city has been waiting a very long time to see if the galaxy's apex predators could learn to be something more than individual killers. Commander Koresh's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. What is the nature of the next trial, Keeper? Something far more dangerous than fighting yourselves, Nethies replied. Next, you must face the thing that destroyed the civilization that built this city. The thing that has been waiting here for thousands of years, growing stronger with each group of hunters that failed to learn the lesson you just mastered. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as new readings appeared on his sensors. Something massive was moving in the depths of the crystalline city, something that made the mirror ships they had just defeated seem like toys by comparison. What kind of thing? He asked, though he suspected he didn't really want to know the answer. The ultimate predator, Keeper Nethies said quietly. The thing that hunts the hunters. The creature that consumed an entire civilization because they, like so many who have come after them, believed that individual strength was the only strength that mattered. As if summoned by his words, the chamber around them began to expand, walls dissolving to reveal the true scope of the crystalline city. And, rising from its depths, ancient and terrible and vast beyond comprehension, came the thing that had been waiting for them all along. The final trial was about to begin, and Marcus realized that everything they had faced so far had been nothing more than preparation for the real test, proving that the galaxy's apex predators could stand together against something that had never known defeat. All right, everyone, Marcus said into the communication channel, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were about to face. Time to show this thing what happens when the galaxy's greatest hunters become something even greater. The ultimate predator rose to meet them, and for the first time in thousands of years, it would face not scattered individuals seeking glory, but a pack united in purpose and deadly beyond measure. The creature that emerged from the depths of the crystalline city defied every attempt at rational description. It was vast enough to dwarf General Thane's massive dreadnought, its body shifting between dimensions like a living nightmare made of crystallized darkness and impossible geometry. Where the mirror ships had been perfect copies, this thing was pure anti-predation, evolution's answer to everything that had ever hunted for sport. Marcus stared at the sensor readings and felt his engineer's mind struggle to process what he was seeing. The creature existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, its form constantly shifting between configurations that suggested it had absorbed and integrated the combat capabilities of every hunting species it had ever encountered. Blessed ancestors, Admiral Rextar whispered over the communication channel. It's massive. Our weapons won't even scratch something that size. Weapons are not the primary concern. Hivemind Node Epsilon 7 reported, its synthetic voice carrying an undertone that might have been awe. Collective sensors indicate the entity possesses adaptive capabilities beyond current classification parameters. It learns from every attack, integrates every defensive strategy it encounters. Commander Koresh's mandibles clicked rapidly as his biocrystalline sensors provided additional data. Zephyrian tactical analysis confirms collective assessment. This creature has encountered hundreds of different species. My sensors detect weapon signatures from civilizations that vanished millennia ago. The creature moved with fluid grace despite its enormous size, flowing through the crystalline city like water poured through a maze. As it approached their formation, Marcus could see the broken remains of countless starships embedded in its hide like trophies, the remnants of every hunting party that had failed to pass this final test. Keeper Nethies, Marcus called out over the communication system. What exactly are we supposed to do here? The thing looks like it could swallow our entire fleet without noticing. The Ancient Guardian's voice carried the weight of centuries of watching this same scenario play out. The Devour, that is what the builders called it, was created to protect this city from those who would hunt for sport. It learns from every predator it encounters, growing stronger and more adaptable with each victory. So how do we defeat something that becomes stronger every time it fights? General Thane asked, his mountain-deep voice unusually subdued. You don't defeat it, Keeper Nethes replied. You prove to it that you're no longer what it was designed to hunt. The creature, the Devourer, reached the edge of their defensive formation and paused, as if studying them. Marcus felt a presence brush against his mind, alien and ancient, and filled with the accumulated rage of 1,000 civilizations that had fallen to unchecked predation. Then it spoke, its voice resonating through dimensions and translating itself directly into their minds rather than through their communication systems. Hunters, it said, and the word carried the weight of eons. You come seeking prey, seeking to kill for pleasure and dominance. I am the ending of all hunts. I am the price of predation without purpose. Marcus felt the creature's attention focus on him specifically, and suddenly understood that this was more than just a test of combat capability. The Devourer was examining their intentions, their motivations, their very nature as beings who had chosen to work together rather than compete. We're not here to hunt, Marcus said, his voice carrying across all communication channels. We came here by accident, pulled into this dimension by quantum forces we didn't fully understand. Yet you bring with you the greatest hunters of your galaxy, the Devourer replied, its presence pressing against their minds like a weight beyond comprehension. 12 commanders who have conquered worlds, who have turned lesser species into prey for their amusement. The accusation hung in the space between them, impossible to deny. Every one of the alien commanders had indeed participated in hunts like the one that had brought them here. They were predators by nature and, by choice, apex killers who had seen Marcus as nothing more than an interesting challenge. But something had changed during their time in this impossible place. Marcus could feel it in the way they moved together now, the way they shared information and coordinated their actions without the hierarchical dominance displays that normally characterize interactions between different species. That's what we were, Commander Koresh said, his harmonic voice carrying an undertone of something that might have been regret. But circumstances have taught us that there are things more important than individual dominance. Words, the Devourer responded, beginning to move closer to their formation. The builders of this city spoke similar words before they fell to their own predatory nature. Prove that you are different. The test, Marcus realized, wasn't going to be about defeating the creature through superior firepower or tactics. It was about demonstrating that they had genuinely evolved beyond their predatory instincts. All ships, stand down weapons, he ordered, knowing that what he was about to suggest would go against every survival instinct the commanders possessed. We're not going to fight it. Marcus, that thing could destroy us all without effort, Admiral Zexhai protested, her grinding voice carrying genuine concern. Exactly, Marcus replied, watching as the Devourer continued its approach. And if we try to fight it, we prove that we're still predators at heart. We prove that when faced with a threat, our first instinct is still violence. He activated the quantum resonance cores one final time, but not to create a weapon. Instead, he configured them to broadcast a signal that would be unmistakable in its meaning, a distress beacon, the kind used to call for rescue rather than to threaten attack. We're going to do something that predators never do, Marcus announced to the assembled fleet. We're going to ask for help. The reaction was immediate and visceral. General Thane's voice rumbled with disbelief. You suggest we show weakness to this creature? Display vulnerability to something designed to destroy hunters? I suggest we show trust, Marcus corrected. Keeper Nethes, you said this city has been waiting to see if the galaxy's apex predators could become something more. Here's our answer. We're choosing to become protectors instead of hunters. He began transmitting the modified distress signal, but not for themselves. Instead, he coded it as a general alert for any ships that might be in danger in normal space. any vessels that might need assistance from a fleet of experienced commanders who had learned to work together. The other commanders, despite every instinct screaming against it, began to follow his lead. One by one, 12 of the galaxy's most feared military minds chose to broadcast their willingness to help rather than their capacity for destruction. The Devourer stopped its advance, its massive form hovering in the space before them as it processed this unprecedented response. For long moments, the crystalline chamber was silent except for the hum of ship's systems and the quantum interference from Marcus's cores. Then, the creature began to change. The darkness that had composed its form started to brighten, shifting from the color of deep space to something that resembled crystalline light. The embedded ship wreckage fell away from its hide, no longer trophies of conquest, but burdens finally released. When it spoke again, its voice carried wonder instead of rage. Impossible, it said, but the word held hope rather than disbelief. In all the millennia I have waited, no group of hunters has ever chosen to stand down. No predators have ever offered aid instead of seeking dominance. Then, maybe it's time for something new, Marcus said quietly. Maybe it's time for the galaxy's apex predators to start protecting the things they used to hunt. The transformation continued, the creature's massive form becoming something beautiful instead of terrible. Marcus realized that this wasn't just a test. It was an opportunity for redemption, both for the commanders who had chosen cooperation over competition, and for the creature that had spent thousands of years destroying those who failed to evolve. The city, Keeper Nethes' voice carried amazement. The Builder's city is responding to your choice. It's awakening from its long slumber. Around them, the crystalline spires began to pulse with new light, their impossible geometries shifting into patterns that suggested life and growth rather than the sterile perfection of a tomb. The wreckage field that had surrounded the city was dissolving, ancient ships being transformed into pure energy that fed back into the dimensional matrix. What happens now? Admiral Rextar asked, his voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than the predatory calculation that had defined him before. Now you return to your galaxy, the transformed Devourer replied, its voice warm instead of threatening. But your return changed. You carry with you the knowledge that strength comes not from conquest, but from protection, not from hunting, but from helping. Marcus felt the quantum resonance cores beginning to stabilize, their chaotic energy patterns resolving into something that could create a stable portal back to normal space. But before he activated the return sequence, he had one final question. Will you come with us? He asked the creature. The galaxy could use a protector like you, something that reminds the powerful that their strength should serve the weak rather than prey upon them. The Devourer, no longer a devourer, but something new, considered this offer. Perhaps, it said finally, but first you must prove that the lessons learned here will survive contact with your old patterns of behavior. Return to your galaxy and show them what you have become. The portal opened, a tunnel of crystallized space-time that led back to the reality they had left behind. One by one, the ships passed through, 13 vessels that had entered this dimension as a hunting party and emerged as something the galaxy had never seen before, apex predators who had chosen to become protectors. Marcus was the last to leave, pausing at the threshold to look back at the transformed city and its ancient guardian. Keeper Nethes, he said, thank you for giving us the chance to become something better. Thank you, Marcus Chun, the guardian replied, for proving that evolution is always possible, even for the galaxy's most perfect predators. The lucky strike passed through the portal and emerged into normal space, where Mining Station Kepler 7 waited exactly where they had left it. But the 12 commanders who returned with Marcus were no longer the same beings who had departed in pursuit of a helpless human engineer. They had become something new, something the galaxy desperately needed. Protectors who understood that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the choice to preserve. Captain Elena Vasquez's voice crackled over the communication system as she detected their return. Marcus? Marcus, is that you? We've been tracking some strange energy readings, and there are 12 unknown ships with you. Are you in distress?" Marcus looked at his tactical display, showing 12 of the galaxy's most powerful warships maintaining perfect defensive formation around his small freight hauler, and smiled. "No, Elena," he replied. "I think for the first time in a long while, everything is exactly as it should be." The hunt was over. The protection had begun.